Morning, Kaiju fans. Today we're going to be talking about the Kaiju Lizzie. A long time ago in the Everglades, Lizzie was minding her own business. She was a saltwater crocodile, but one of the pathogens fell down in her territory. Of course, seen this as a threat, she chomped down on it, only to feel the effects of the canister. It gave Lizzie tusks, sharp teeth, spikes, and gills. She also had spikes on her tail, which was going to be pretty useful for what she was going to have to encounter later on. A couple of hours later, she was about the size of a school bus. Her journey didn't end there. She saw a couple of people catching crocodiles and thought that her territory was in danger, so Lizzie had to act quick. She chomped down on the boat, sinking it down to the bottom of the river. The people swam up, but Lizzie had to act fast. Lizzie chomped down on one of the mercenaries and took him into the water, dragging him, chomping down possibly on his body, tearing him in two. Lizzie's journey didn't end there. She swam and swam throughout the river, only growing in size. She increased the size of a semi-truck. Lizzie was big, and we're talking big. Her teeth, which she grew multiple teeth. Each one was agonizing, but she had to act tough. Then she gained this durability. But then, as soon as she was walking in the forest, an irritating noise from Claire's tower rang out. She heard it miles away and was ready to reach it and destroy it at all costs. Lizzie dived in the river, possibly the Mexican Gulf. She swam and swam, knocking over boats. Soon enough, she was about the size of 2 football fields. Her journey wasn't done. She was swimming and swimming all the way to Chicago. Whatever that noise was, she wanted it to stop. As she reached the river of Chicago, she swam and swam to make a sharp turn. She did as she moved. She made a sharp turn and was close to the bank. She knocked over a boat and rised out of it. She roared in furious anger and came slamming down on the concrete. The military had to act fast, so they started unloading everything they got at her, firing missiles, rockets, guns, but it was no match for her. She used her giant jaws to clamp down on 3 military vehicles and throw them aside like a toy. They landed down on George and Ralph, nearly hitting them, but luckily they both dodged out of the way. George slammed his hand into a Davy Buster's and ran. He kept running. But this story isn't about George or Ralph. It's about the main star, Lizzie. Lizzie was gigantic. The military was even scared. Lizzie was now in charge, her giant size intimidating George and Ralph. She began giving them orders on what to do. They simply followed as they needed to survive. Lizzie was seen throwing cars and throwing tanks like little toys. People running in fear. Possibly she was probably eating the males, as in the games, she eats males and not females. She's crushing soldiers and clamping them down in her jaws. Nothing was stopping Lizzie. She was too durable. As they thought and thought, they realized they would have to take down Lizzie by bombs. So they called the Air Force. They sent a stealth bomber on the way to Chicago, which would take a little while. Soon enough, the irritating noise could not stop, so Lizzie wanted to shut it up. Ralph and George were already on top of the tower, but Lizzie was still climbing up. Her massive weight was too giant. She began digging and digging throughout the building and climbing it due to her gecko DNA. Lizzie almost reached the top, but due to her massive size and weight, causing it to come down and collapse. Lizzie buried in the rubble, she decided that it was time to fight back. She rose up out of the rubble and let out an intimidating roar, causing her frills to move outward in an intimidating fashion. Lizzie was not messing around. As Lizzie saw George, she ran up towards him, but George had the opportunity to strike back. George grabbed a metal crane and slapped Lizzie in the face with it. This made her more furious, causing her to fall down into a building. Lizzie was digging her way out of the building, but then she saw Ralph coming in to attack George. She knew that this was a good idea because it was only 1 against 2. Lizzie tried all of her might to try and get out of the building, but was still stuck. As Ralph was shot and flew into a building, she glided out of it. Lizzie, setting herself free, started running towards Ralph, chomping down on his neck and finishing the blow by chomping down on his skull, tearing it apart, doing a death roll. Lizzie ate Ralph's head. She possibly laughed in victory, killing 1 of the mutants. She wanted to reign supreme and show the world what she could do. She started looking towards George, but got shot by grenades. It was Davis Okoye stopping Lizzie from doing her assault. Lizzie started running at Davis, but he was too quick. Lizzie's giant size made her slower. Lizzie started diving through an apartment building. She crashed out of it and roared in anger. As Davis landed down and hit himself, he was knocked out but woke up soon enough. Lizzie roared in his face, her gills opening outward, and her hot stench breath filled the air. Davis only looked in shock and fear, but then George came down, hitting Lizzie in the face of a truck. Lizzie was mad. She then bit George by the leg and dragged him towards her, opening her jaws. But then Davis threw a grenade inside of one of her frills, causing it to explode. This only stunned her for a little bit, but then she woke up. She raised her tail high in the air, ready to slam it down on Davis Okoye, but George stopped it just in time. George gripped on Lizzie's tail, but Lizzie had an opportunity. Lizzie used her tail and threw it far. George hit a metal pipe and was roaring in pain. Davis was screaming, "George, no!" Little did they know, nearby jets were coming in fast. The Rock got in a helicopter and soon enough said, "George, you have to get up. You gotta move." Only for Lizzie to chomp down on his arm and thrash him, throwing him on the ground and roaring. As Lizzie continued her assault on George, the Rock got in a helicopter and started firing each and every bullet. Lizzie stopped and started walking towards the helicopter, roaring in agony. Lizzie continued walking towards the helicopter. Davis Okoye had a quick move up his sleeve and shot the helicopter's rockets at her, stunning her. A cloud of smoke filled the air, but Lizzie came out of it, having no effect. Lizzie chomped down on the helicopter and threw it away. She glared at Davis and started walking towards him. He hit a nearby building. Lizzie used her tusk to dig her way inside of the building, trying to chomp down on the Rock's tiny body. She wasn't looking and paying attention. She almost chomped down on his foot, but George came to the rescue, holding the same metal rod that Lizzie bit through him with. Lizzie looked up in shock, her eyes widening, her pupil dilating as it stabbed her in the eye. She roared and roared in agony, but then George slammed it down harder in her eye. Soon enough, she succumbed to her wounds and died. The Rock and George reigned victorious.